beyond ideas of wrongdoing and right-doing. There is a field, I'll meet you there. When the soul lies down in that grass, the world is too full to talk about. Ideas, language, even the phrase each other doesn't make sense. Hi everyone. Today I'm talking to Chris. He must be one of the most gentle souls I've ever met. I always enjoy his company when we run into each other at Friends, as his energy is really calming and I find that quite energizing. He's doing amazing work on himself and I'm very happy and grateful to be able to hear about his spiritual past today. Good afternoon, Chris. How are you doing?
Hi, I'm good. And you? Thanks for inviting me.
You are very, very welcome. It's actually not me inviting you. Well, it is me inviting you, but it's me being the grateful one for you doing it. Thank you very much. I so love your space.
That's beautiful. Yeah.
I mean, look at that. As we're sitting, for the listeners, we are looking at Lion's Head. And we're seeing paragliders floating in the air around us. So it's absolutely amazing.
That's a great view. Yeah.
So how are you doing?
I'm pretty good. Yeah.
How's life treating you?
It's been good. I've been in quite a good space lately. I've been feeling okay about things, okay about myself, which has often been a struggle for me, as I think it is for a lot of us.
For a lot of us, indeed, yeah.
Lots of perfectionism, lots of beating on myself. So I'm learning to be kinder and more compassionate to myself and in turn to others, and just treat myself with unconditional love and acceptance, and that really helps.
Awesome.
And I can get on with things as to the best of my ability.
Yeah. How long have we known each other now?
Since the first time I met you was when I was still in primary care, and that was in July 2010.
Is it that long ago already?
Yeah.
So it's 7.5 years.
Yeah. I think at that time you were about 6 or 7 months clean.
Okay.
And you came to do a share.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well. Yeah. Yes,
I actually shared at a treatment facility last night, not close to us, but in Stellenbosch. And I haven't done a treatment facility share for a while.
I haven't done that for a while either. I quite miss it, actually.
Yeah. You must actually let our old facility know that you're available, because I still get calls every now and then. So you've been in recovery now for 7.5 years, in other words.
Yeah.
Was that your first go?
Yes.
That's excellent. That's wonderful. And where did you grow up?
In Cape Town. I was born overseas. I was born in the USA, in fact.
So you're an American.
Yes, but don't hold it against me.
I'll try my utmost. As long as you didn't vote.
I did.
Did you? Did you vote correctly?
I did.
Yes.
I voted for her.
Yippee. Okay, I like you again.
We moved here when I was 6 years old. My dad is kind of a half and half. He grew up here and in America.
Okay.
We moved here when I was 6 years old.
So where in America were you born?
In Boston.
Okay, Boston.
Which is where my dad lives now. He's moved back there. My parents divorced a few years after we moved here initially.
Okay.
And I've pretty much lived here ever since. I lived in Boston between the ages of 19 and 21, and that was 1989, 91.
Okay.
And I moved back here in 1991, and I've pretty much been here since.
Okay. What did you go and do in Boston?
I wanted to move there permanently, and a lot of it had to do with the political situation here.
Okay.
And I found a university that I quite liked, and I was accepted, and it was quite a small, relatively small school of about 3,000 undergraduates.
Okay.
And I ended up going there for a year, but what actually happened was I started to become quite confused about where I wanted to live, particularly when things started to change here.
Okay.
Which happened quite soon after my arrival there. So it was a bit
Damn it, that was bad time.
Yeah, it was a bit of a dilemma for me. And I actually ended up coming here for a kind of a holiday, which turned into a 6-month stay. And then I went back to the US again, and during that time when I was back there the second time, I struggled quite a lot and eventually decided that I would rather would rather live in Cape Town, particularly as things were changing and
Okay.
opening up. So
Okay.
yeah, I made the move back in 1991.
Cool. Welcome back.
Thank you.
I always say, once you've had the African soil under your feet, you're going to struggle to
That's
fit
right.
in
Yeah.
anywhere else.
Mm.
So where in Cape Town did you grow up?
Initially in Rondebosch and Claremont, Kenilworth,
Oh.
and then spent a few years in Observatory, and then moved here to this flat here in Gardens, and
Okay.
went to school down the road at Cape Town High School.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. God,
And
so you are as local as you can get.
That's
eh?
right. Yeah.
Wow. You don't get a lot of those.
Yeah.
So parents got divorced around your primary school time.
Yeah. 10 years old.
Okay.
Mm.
And in terms of growing up and having a sense of spirituality or religion or whatever, what was your exposure?
My parents are very non-religious
Okay.
and pretty skeptical or dismissive even of religion, or particularly of dogma, at least. But even talk of spirituality would make them kind of bristle a bit. I think they're just not interested in that kind of thing. Me, I never tended towards any kind of religion either. In fact, I found it to be quite hypocritical in many ways.
Okay.
But there was a need for a kind of a I suppose it was a bit of a yearning. It was a need to find meaning in life,
Yeah.
to discover, to seek answers, and to try and feel comfortable as well in the world, which was something that I certainly struggled with. But I found that and this is still applicable today in my recovery and spirituality and recovery, I found that I would gear towards a lot of, should I say, tangible things, or things that I could perceive that exist in the world, like nature, living in a beautiful city.
Yeah.
But also part of my spiritual journey initially was my discovery of my drug of choice, which was weed, cannabis.
Okay. They don't call us a Cape of Good Dope for nothing.
Yes, true. And I started that when I was about 17, 18, and before.
You were actually a late starter.
Yeah. And interesting enough, I never used to drink alcohol. I never liked alcohol. I was able to avoid succumbing to the peer pressure that
Okay.
usually happens around that age, 16
Yeah.
or so. So I didn't like alcohol, but I continued to feel, kind of like an outsider. And I struggled with depression. I got diagnosed with clinical depression.
Okay, self.
My parents...
From an early age.
I can't remember exactly when, but it was probably around early teens or mid-teens. And I went through different forms of therapy, which were all quite helpful. My parents were quite liberal and very understanding. They weren't pushy in any way. They wanted me to learn, to figure out things for myself and learn things for myself, which was good on one hand. But on the other hand, I also found that I became excessively self-reliant, as I think a lot of people who succumb to addiction do. But certainly the using initially was part of my journey, because
Okay.
it certainly did allow me to blossom a bit, to open up more, to feel more comfortable in life, to deal with depression. But it very quickly became an all-day, everyday thing within a few months, actually.
Oh, wow.
And then that lasted for the next 20-odd years before I got clean. But I certainly still remember during that time an increased need for just an appreciation of life and the universe and beautiful things and relations between people, friendships, love relationships, and the importance of that. So I guess, I've always seen it as a almost a kind of a Zen philosophy, but a lot of it has just been about seeing the universe and existence for what it is, and looking for beautiful things, but also accepting that not everything is I'm not going to like or enjoy everything, and that's the way it is, and I can accept that. But certainly my struggles with perfectionism and self-centeredness and making things about me, that went on for many years. I wanted to be a good person. I wanted to follow what I now understand as spiritual principles of the program. I always wanted to, and I found that it was just such a struggle for me, and that was very frustrating. And I didn't want to, become a kind of a born-again religious person, because that just didn't work for me.
It freaked me the fuck out.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, the dogma, the kind of, they're just the idealism about it. I mean, I was enough of an idealist as it is, but that whole kind of, now you are saved and everything is fine and hunky-dory. That just doesn't work for me.
My father became born again at some stage in my life, and it was freaky. The amount of times that he said, "Praise the Lord," and I remember my mother at some stage saying, "If he says praise the Lord one more time." So how did you relate to religious studies at school? Because we were forced to have religious studies.
In my school,
I wish you could see the body language. That there was kind of a drop of the shoulders.
In my school, it wasn't that big. I remember maybe, it must have been one class a week.
Yeah, in our class, one class a week as well.
And I don't really remember a lot about it. I do remember that the instructor was a fairly humble guy, and I remember watching a movie called Christiana F.
Yes, I remember that movie.
Yeah, and so this was in Standard 6, so I would have been 14 years old, and I remember watching this movie and seeing the scenes where she and her boyfriend go through cold turkey from heroin withdrawal, and I remember seeing that and thinking, boy, I don't ever want to do that.
Yeah.
So I often wonder about what the effects of that was on my subsequent. I mean, most drugs, in fact, I completely avoided. Like, I was really not interested in drugs like cocaine. I've never tried cocaine or anything like that.
Okay.
Because I just had no interest in it whatsoever. The consequences just seemed to be
the payoff is just not worth it.
For me. Yeah, and that's one thing I remember about that class. But for the most part, I only remember going to those classes for maybe the first 2 years of high school, and then not again. I do remember towards the end of my final high school year, I remember the instructor say to me something like, I hope that you find your spiritual path in your future. And at the time, I was a bit cynical about that comment, and I said to myself, well, I probably will, but it's not going to be anything like you want it to be. But then on the other hand, now if I think about it, I mean, maybe I think he was quite a humble and accepting or fairly open-minded person. So and we used to sing hymns in assembly, things like that. But that was it. I mean, we didn't really have a huge amount of prayer or anything like that during assembly. I just sang along with the hymns because I like music.
Your music is your thing. It's your industry.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that's always been probably my first love, that and cats. And in fact, both music and cats are animals, but especially cats are an important part of my spirituality. Because as I said, it's about appreciating things around me and appreciating the universe. Music has always been something that I've been able to it's kind of like soul food in a way, and it has helped me to enjoy life. And during my teenage years, it was quite a almost like a lifesaver.
Okay.
And cats and their whole demeanor and and the kind of unconditional love that they
Yeah.
show, or that all animals
Or complete lack of unconditional
show. That too sometimes.
or unconditional rejection.
Yeah. But they always come back for
their
food.
rejection is, at least, it's not about you, it's me.
Exactly. I have to be independent, or at least pretend that I am. Yeah.
Listen, Chris, what did you study for that year in America?
I did. We had to do a writing seminar course. We had to do what's called humanities in America,
Okay.
and it's. I'm not sure what the equivalent is here, but we did do. We studied a lot of classics, and then for the other optional classes, I did things like theatre, music, music theory.
So it was in the music field that you kind of stuck to.
Well, this was more of a. It wasn't really a practical music course. It was more just about learning about theory.
Okay.
I remember doing French as well, which was something I did in high school for 5 years.
Oh, wow.
And so I did that for a year, and I did quite well actually. But even before the end of my first year, I was already thinking of moving back here.
Okay.
So it was a difficult time, and thinking about it now, I'm glad I moved back here. I wouldn't particularly want to be living in America now.
Yeah.
But certainly at the time, it was a big dilemma.
Okay.
And
And your mom, is she South African?
no, my
Also
mom,
American?
she grew up in Boston. Her father, in fact, was born in Italy,
Okay.
in a small town near the city of Crotone. And he came to America at the age of his late teens, I think, like maybe 18, 19. And that would have been in the early 20th century.
Looking for the American dream.
Yes, which didn't happen.
What brought them to South Africa?
My dad was born here.
Okay, so he's a South African connection.
Yeah.
Okay.
He was born here and his father was kind of half and half American, half South African. They had been back and forth over the generations. His mother was South African, and at about age 13, the family moved to Boston, and that's where my dad and my parents met and married. And I think part of it was that my dad was offered a good job here with SAF Marine.
Okay.
My dad also he had quite a lot of connection here.
Okay. When you came back to South Africa, what did you do? Study further?
I did, and in fact at this time I was not using.
Okay.
But I still was having quite a lot of issues with depression and life stuff. I would get involved in relationships, and they would always be very difficult and end painfully. And I studied for a year at UCT, but
also music.
Didn't. I did. What did I do? I did a drama class, but not the acting class. It was more just. Again, it was called a non-performers drama class, and I did other because I started at first year again, so I did first year psychology, sociology.
Okay, that's what I did as well.
Yeah, and I eventually continued studying at UNISA after just spending 1 year at UCT, but I have still to this day not finished an undergraduate degree.
Okay.
Because of various things. It's certainly a lot to do with addiction, but the UCT thing, I just ended up dropping out and working. I was working in a music shop, in fact. And then I started a career in music retail, which lasted for quite a long time. And then I decided to, and as I say, I started to study at UNISA. And I continued with psychology, but went back to using very addictively. And one of the consequences of that, as I think it is with a lot of people, is a lot of unfinished...
Our priorities change.
So
your priorities change, so somewhere along the way.
Yeah. Well, certainly a lot of, like many other things, it was like something that was started and left unfinished.
Yeah.
But I think that as it is with addictive
Yeah.
using, it's not sustainable really, that lifestyle.
And you DJ as well?
I do, yeah.
Often, or is it just a hobby?
It's not a regular thing. I do get invited to events by people that I know on occasion. And a lot of that is through my... I've had a job at Mabu Vinyl for the last few years, and now it's down to just working there once a week while I run my importing business from home.
What's that called?
Music Source.
Okay,
Yeah.
cool.
So people that I've met at the shop and got to know have asked me to DJ at some of their events.
Okay.
For example, there's a couple that I know who put on an event once a month called Future Nostalgia.
Okay.
And sometimes they have live acts, sometimes DJs, and they've asked me a couple of times to play for them, which is always good fun. I play with records, only with records. It's because it's just great fun. I love to mix with records. And
so
records
vinyl is your passion.
Yeah. Records has also been something that I've started to collect again. I think I started again about 10 years ago when I started to realize that I actually prefer the sound of vinyl to CDs. After...
Now, the collection in that room next to us, is that your professional collection to sell?
Some of it is. But
some of that is for sale, for distribution, because that's what you do. You import and distribute.
Yeah.
And how do you market?
I have I started out by contacting people that I knew were collectors.
Okay.
And that was from contacts that I've made over the years. And I've got customers through Mabu, and that's perfectly okay with Mabu. They don't mind.
Okay.
Because it's really a separate business. I do new vinyl and they do secondhand. So.
Okay.
So that's fine, and I pay them a little commission as well.
Cool.
And friends of friends have come to me, and I've got quite a nice customer base, and I've got a number of people who are crazy collectors like me, and so they order plenty and they keep me going. But in terms of online marketing, I have a website, but it's still kind of in the process of getting going. And in fact, in general, with this business, it's not something I've done before. It's been very slow in getting things together, and that has a lot to do with my own struggles with confidence and struggling with feelings of inadequacy and so on. But I'm learning as I go along, and it's quite hard to get to all the work that I need to do. So it's taken ages to get this website ready. But I think once it is ready, it should help with getting quite a lot of customers.
Are you on Twitter?
No.
Not?
No.
There's a guy on Twitter called Aidan Hatfield, and he is a depression sufferer, and his company is called Music We Trust, and it's a clothing range. And for everything that he sells, 50% of the profits go towards a depression support NGO. And it seems as if he's doing amazing work.
That's great.
And the interesting thing is that he doesn't take antidepressants. He uses music to support him through his depression.
That's very interesting. I should have a look at that.
Definitely. Aidan Hatfield in Music We Trust.
Is he based in South Africa?
Based in London.
Okay.
Yeah. So I ran into him on Twitter. So I'm following him on Twitter. So that's interesting.
Yeah. I mean, I have taken antidepressants for the last 10 years or so. And I remember initially I was quite reluctant to start on them.
Me as well.
But I did. And they did help initially. It's a mixture of concern, possibly a bit of cynicism about the pharmaceutical industry, and getting hooked on their drugs, but also at the same time recognizing that I am somebody who has this condition,
Me as well.
It's clinical. It's a medical condition, and probably is also related to a chemical kind of imbalance.
Yeah.
So there is the need for these meds, or at least that's how it seems.
Okay, so back to your spirituality. So during the 20 years of your using and working with music, were you on a spiritual path? Was that something that you were aware of?
I still adopted the same kind of Zen philosophy. I still felt that I was seeking answers, or seeking a kind of serenity, I suppose, although I wouldn't have used that word then.
Yeah.
But it was pretty similar to what I had always been doing up to then. But at the same time, I was really struggling with a lot of the issues, or that we would call defects or shortcomings. Unwittingly, I probably thought that this is what everyone struggles with, the same kind of issues. And still continued to, as many of us do, still continue to feel quite out of place, and struggled a lot with self-esteem and inadequacy and so on, and a lot of self-loathing, which was based on a kind of perfectionism. So I
never good enough,
yeah,
just always falling short of your own standards.
yes, which were impossible to reach. And I found, like I said earlier, I found that I always wanted to do the right thing. I always wanted to be kind and loving to other people, and I couldn't, and I never really knew why, and it was very frustrating for me. And it's really only, and thank goodness for the program that I do now, because now I am actually finally able to behave according to the spiritual principles of the program.
So live the morality that you wanted to live all along.
Yeah, exactly.
Cool.
When I was using, I became very isolated in many ways, and quite insular. If I had a romantic relationship with somebody, I would always be quite emotionally unavailable, but also I would struggle with a kind of a controlling nature, these control impulses, a manipulation of my partner, but also just I never really quite accepting them as they are, wanting to mold them a bit. And I could see myself doing this, and I thought, this is not what I want to do. You know, why am I behaving like this towards somebody that I should be respecting and accepting and loving? And it really used to frustrate me, and my self-loathing would go crazy. And if I hate myself, it's very hard for someone else to love me. So I recognize this need or this desire to do the right thing, and also to try and live a relatively balanced life, and that is something that I almost took inspiration from the universe for, the yin and yang balancing forces that hold everything together, and that's also something I could never quite get right. I also believed that, well, at some point I'm obviously just going to get tired of using, and I'm just going to stop and so on, but that also never happened. So I never quite was able to get into balance, and it's something I still struggle with today. And my particular drug of choice meant that I was pretty lethargic. I lost a lot of motivation or zest for life, and things really just started to get worse and worse, and I had a very long, drawn-out rock bottom, I think, which lasted several years, during which, and it was not knowing about the nature of the disease of addiction, trying to stop on my own, not being able to, trying all kinds of things, cutting down, and not only would it not work, but I would always go back to all day, every day, and I couldn't understand why. So it was it was a difficult time. It was a time when I wanted to follow a spiritual path, which wasn't necessarily a kind of a mystical thing, more of just I suppose a day-to-day life on life's terms thing, where do what I need to do. I'm a responsible being, but I have an appreciation for everything around me, and I feel like I'm part of this universe, this process. But that was hard to. It was hard to feel that way, and especially when I started to become more and more isolated towards the end of my using time. There were long periods in which I really didn't have any friends per se. I had a couple of using buddies, and that was about it. And I saw my family, and that was about it really. So it was quite depressing.
Sounds dark.
Yeah.
Listen, and when you came into recovery and you saw the 12 steps and the word God, how did you connect with, what was your journey into recovery like? Did you take to it like a duck to water and said, okay, here I am, God save me, or how did that work for you?
Not initially. The first time that I tried a form of treatment was outpatient.
Okay.
And I was introduced to the program and the steps, and I was concerned about what I thought was the religious aspect of it. But I went through, and I was starting to get fairly desperate by this stage. So I went through the entire 6-week program and learned quite a bit. But it didn't work for me because I wasn't ready to. I actually wasn't ready to abstain. When I was told that I had to stop completely and that was it, I wasn't ready to accept that.
Okay.
That took me another about 9 months or so, and then I went to inpatient care. And by that time, I was desperate, and I was ready, and I was prepared to do what I needed to do. But there still was a concern that I was going to have to adopt some kind of what I saw as a religious philosophy, or at the very least that I was going to have to start believing in something, some deity or some entity. But actually, I don't.
Okay.
I was, as I said before, I was excessively self-reliant for many, many years, and I wanted to have all the answers and get it all right. I had this need to be right as well, which was just based on a kind of a need for security or safety or things to be, to make sense in my head. And I believed I had all the power I needed to stop using, for example, but clearly that wasn't true. And all I really had to do was just move away from that and say, actually, I don't have as much power and knowledge or answers as I think I do, or even as I need to do. And I never wanted to adopt another philosophy of life. It just seemed like a crutch to me. I was like, no, I'm going to do it my way and individualistically and so on. But when I started to explore the program, which initially was in primary care, and I started to talk to other people and see how the program was working for them, religious and not religious people, then I realized actually I can adopt another philosophy into my life, and in fact it's become necessary to do so because I don't have all the power and knowledge that I need. So a power greater than myself has essentially been me plus anything else that can help me, which is the program, sponsor, fellow people in recovery, meetings, spiritual principles, but also just the universe. It's kind of like Douglas Adams, life, the universe, and everything. So it's never been about a particular entity, and certainly not one that is an interventionist, sticks his hand down and fiddles with things here. I tend to believe more in my own agency where that's concerned, but recognizing that I've been clean for several years now, and I've thankfully never relapsed, and sure, that's something to be proud of. Pat myself on the back on, but at the same time I have to acknowledge that this is not something I can do on my own. I do need help, and it's okay to need help, and it's okay to ask for help from from the universe in
That's a
in
huge
various forms.
shift, hey?
Yeah.
From where you were.
Certainly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it sounds as if you've adopted the good orderly direction concept. You know, just whatever takes you on the right path and keeps you on the right path, and that right path is a path that works for you.
Yeah.
Not prescribed by anything, by anybody. It's what's okay for you.
And I think that's the great thing about the steps, and that's why it works for me and many other people, and can work for anyone, really, which is a fascinating thing to think about. I mean, how many other things, programs like that are there out there that really will work for anyone?
Absolutely.
And can quite easily be adapted to suit one's needs. And that doesn't mean that, things don't change along the way or evolve, as they certainly have for me, and I see it as a good orderly direction, and a kind of a question of karma. It's quite obvious that if I do this thing that's unhealthy for me, it's going to have these consequences. And also, having said that, it is at times it is very difficult for me to do the right thing, especially when it comes to looking after myself, and that is something that I'm trying to work on, and it means that I have to develop more of a willingness and more of a sense of self-worth and love for myself. But certainly looking after myself and my health has been quite difficult. When it comes to interactions with other people and emotional connections, or expressing myself emotionally, I think I've made quite a lot of progress in that area. And I also go to therapy. I go to therapy twice a week, as I have done for many years. And
Fabulous.
Yeah, and the person I go to is in fact somebody who worked in the treatment center that I was at before I.
Okay.
Nikki, you know Nikki.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, she's great. She knows me well, and she is a very empathetic person. She really is lovely, and she's helped me a lot.
So that's part of your taking care of yourself is getting therapy.
Certainly that part of it,
Yeah.
and learning how to engage emotionally with other people, and also to try and do the right thing where other people are concerned, and if I get it wrong, then apologize or promptly admit, as it says in the steps. So that area has been I've made more progress in that area than I have in, say, the physical part of the looking after myself part. I've been able to, for example, I've been able to change my diet, because my dietary needs, for example, I was told that I have quite high cholesterol, so I've been able to reduce my intake of animal fats, dairy, and stuff like that. But things like exercise, sleeping pattern is a struggle for me. I've always been a night owl kind of person, and it's been very difficult for me to to have a regular sleeping pattern, particularly because I don't have to be up at a particular time. I can keep my own hours, and that's very nice, but it does mean that I tend to be quite indulgent, and it's self-will. That's really what it is. And it is difficult to move away from.
It sounds as if once you've got let's just call it what it is, a fucked up sleeping pattern.
Yeah, it is.
I'm married to somebody like that.
Yeah.
And that's one thing that I've learned for myself in recovery, is my sleep is so important. I have even have to say it myself, I've got an excellent sleep hygiene, because sleep was a problem for me in active addiction. And the gift for me of recovery is sleep. So, oh my God, I treasure that with my whole heart and my whole soul. As I said to you when we set up this chat, I said to you, this time, because it's still time for an afternoon nap. I love my naps over weekends. It's part of what I do. So as things stand at the moment, from what I can gather, you do everything that we taught in recovery, all the pillars and those type of things. But do you do the meditation and those type of things, or does music fill that for you?
I've tried different forms of formal meditation, which I do sometimes do, and I went to a mindfulness workshop, which was fantastic. And during that workshop, we did quite a lot of yoga, because yoga is a way of being mindful about one's body. And after that, I started to go to yoga very regularly.
Okay.
And I went to this lovely spiritual center, ashram, in fact, in Rondebosch East, to do yoga. But then, sadly, my car was stolen. I don't know. Did I tell you about this? I can't remember. But my car was stolen in July last year, so transport has been difficult. And I haven't got myself back into going regularly to yoga. And I have a constant. My flatmate goes very regularly, so I have a constant reminder. But it's been a struggle to get back into, or to motivate myself, even though I live in an area where there are plenty of places that I could go.
So yoga was for your form of meditation?
Yes. So I found yoga very meditative, a great way of getting in touch with myself and just being with myself.
Yeah.
At the end of every yoga session, there's always a 15-minute unwinding period, where you just kind of lie there.
I used to love
the instructor that. That's terrific. And I think on a day-to-day basis, I do use things like music, cats even, as a meditative tool. Also, even something as simple as looking at the beautiful view outside and appreciating things like nature and things like that, what I see around me, I also find is a kind of a form of prayer as well. Because it's a way of being grateful for what's around me, which allows me to practice something like gratitude, which doesn't come that naturally to me.
Hardly ever, eh?
But meditation for me is, I guess it is about trying to clear my mind a bit, or at least not obsess about something that is not here in this moment. It's about being in the moment, really. And my head can get quite cluttered. I can feel a bit overwhelmed by life sometimes.
By the smallest things as well.
Yeah, and any form of meditation, whether it be looking at the view outside, is a way of just shutting that down for a bit.
And you've got such a lovely park just up the road,
This entire area is beautiful. I love going for walks around here.
I used to hang out in the park a lot. Actually, I think my will still says that my ashes need to go into that park. I think it's so lovely to it's such a beautiful park.
That's lovely.
I love when I drove past there now on the way here, the family is just hanging out there, and the dogs. In summer when the dogs play in that fountain, it's so lovely to just sit there and watch the dogs with absolute passion for life playing in that water.
It's great. But talking about families and people going there, they have these free concerts
and good,
this time of year.
Good music as well.
Yeah, and I've been to it once or twice, and it really is nice. It's just a lovely atmosphere. Lots of people enjoying themselves, and I think
they're
it's
actually having mikasa.
Mm-hmm.
I love mikasa. I love that. I don't know. There's just a nice vibe to them, and I think they're one of the bands who's coming. And I thought I must drive through and come and listen to them one day.
Yeah. But this area, this whole city, really. Is
you live
to
in an amazing spot.
It is nice to walk around here. Although I struggle with the hills a bit, but it's
tried jogging in this area. But Chris, this was awesome.
Yes,
thank you very much. I appreciate your time, and this coffee was excellent, by the way. Are you a bit of a coffee connoisseur?
I am. It's call it what it is. It's an addiction. But I used to drink 5 to 6 cups a day, and nowadays I have maximum 2.
Yeah, so I take two cups of caffeine as well. So this was my last one, and I'm always reluctant to say yes to other people's coffee as my last cup for the day. I'm always afraid, what if it's awful? But thank you so much. I really appreciate it. It was awesome hearing your story. I never knew that you were American. And the music, I don't see you as a DJ. I've never heard you DJing, but I've seen your name on posters quite often. And I always think, oh wow, this is interesting. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
I so enjoyed this time spent with Chris. As mentioned, we sat comfortably in his lounge in Gardens, Cape Town, overlooking Lion's Head on a most glorious day, drinking fantastic coffee. I can hardly think of a more suitable backdrop for a conversation like this. I'm very happy that Chris is walking this path of recovery with such commitment and is finding the gifts of recovery coming to him. I can hardly think of a more deserving person. If you are interested in looking at his vinyl business, please look him up at info@musicsource.co.za. If you have any feedback or remarks, please feel free to pop me an email or connect on social media. It will be great to hear from you. If you want to know more about what I do, please feel free to connect with me on my website, which is www.freddie.org.za, or find me on Facebook at www.facebook.com/freddie.org.za, or on Twitter at @RensburgFreddie. Remember that Freddie is always spelled with an IE at the end. Be safe. Bye.